Welcome, Mike. We are ready for you to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Kim, and good afternoon, and welcome back to our local infrastructure hub sessions. This is our 23rd session since we launched the hub last July, and I hope you'll find them helpful thus far.
I gotta go.
This past Saturday, we marked Earth Day, a holiday that began when I was 28 years old. So it's very recent, actually. The first Earth Day helped drum up support in Congress for the Clean Air Act and the Endangered Species Act. And it's an annual reminder of how much more remains to be done. It's also a chance for mayors to build support for new environmental initiatives. About 16 years ago on Earth Day, we launched Plan YC, a sustainability strategy for New York City. And that included 127 projects and policies to fight climate change and make New York City more livable. One of those projects we launched was an effort to plant 1 million trees in New York City. We raised some private money to help fund it, and with the help of our friend Bette Midler, we also brought in some muscle to sell it to the public, Big Bird. But it wasn't a hard sell. After all, trees are great for public health because they clean the air and provide shade. They're great for property values, as studies show. And of course, they're great for fighting climate change because they absorb carbon dioxide. Trees are also bipartisan. Who doesn't like trees? They're like mom and apple pie. Today, there are new federal resources available to bring green projects to life through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And that includes projects like tree planting. So as your teams think about new ideas for fighting climate change, keep thinking big. But remember, a big idea can be a simple idea. And our team here at Bloomberg Philanthropies is here to support you every step of the way. Today, we're going to hear from a member of the administration who has spent her entire career working on environmental issues, Brenda Mallory. She joined the Environmental Protection Agency in 2000, and for 20 years, she has served under Democratic and Republican administrations. She's played a central role in tackling toxic chemicals, greenhouse gases, gas emissions, water pollution, and much more. President Biden made a smart choice in selecting her to chair the Council on Environmental Quality. Brenda, thank you for joining us. I know all the mayors are looking forward to hearing your thoughts and guidance. As they say, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone from the White House. It is such a pleasure to have a chance to speak with you today. And happy belated Earth Day. As we like to say around here, at CEQ, every day is Earth Day. And so it's nevertheless a privilege to be part of the special program for you all. I'm excited to be with you virtually. I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and Results for America for bringing us all together. It's an honor to speak with local and regional leaders who are driving progress across the nation. We know that enduring change has to occur on the community level, whether it begins there or not. And that's why the work that you all are doing and leading is so vital to our ability to create resilient cities and address climate change. The topic of today's event, Advancing Environmental Protections for All, is fitting for me to talk about given last week's announcements. On Friday, President Biden signed a historic executive order on revitalizing our nation's commitment to environmental justice for all. Surrounded by a crowd of environmental justice experts and leaders and advocates in the Rose Garden at the White House, the president put his pen to work for communities that have been historically left behind. The basic premise of the executive order, and really of all of the environmental justice work that we do, is a belief that every community deserves access to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. The EO recommits to this premise and ensures that all federal agencies are doing their part to protect all people, regardless of income or zip code or race or ethnicity or language or cultural heritage. The EO lays out a vision of an environmentally just community. That's one that is healthy, sustainable, climate resilient, where legacy pollution is addressed, investments to build a stronger economy and trained workforce are deployed, and everyone has equitable access to nature. To achieve this vision, the EO calls for a government-wide approach to identifying and tackling the barriers that have kept this vision from really becoming a reality. It helps address gaps in science to understand and reduce health impacts. And it requires agencies to notify communities if there is a release of toxic substances from a federal facility in the area. As we transition to the next generation clean energy economy, this executive order will help us to do exactly what this webinar title demands: make sure that all people can reap its benefits. In the 2 years of the Biden-Harris administration, we have already made tremendous progress. The Justice 40 initiative, a signature feature of the president's environmental justice agenda, has us poised to accomplish much more. And for those who have not been tracking, the Justice 40 initiative aims to direct 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal climate and clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. I'm proud to say that this initiative has inspired a number of cities and communities across the country to adopt their own Justice 40-like programs. As the historic investments from the president's bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funnel through the Justice 40 framework, we are making a real difference on the ground in communities. We've worked across all levels of government to curb carbon emissions, build resilience to climate impacts, and reduce toxic pollution. We've deployed billions of dollars to remove lead pipes and are working toward the president's goal of replacing every lead service line in the nation. We've installed air monitors in neighborhoods overburdened by pollution and contamination and have advanced work on cleaning up Superfund sites that sit too close to where people live and breathe. And we've also made historic progress in replacing old school buses with modern electric ones across the nation, protecting children and families from polluted air and lowering costs for disadvantaged communities. And last week, the Environmental Protection Agency took steps to move forward on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a program that will distribute $27 billion in environmental justice grants to increase energy security, reduce pollution, and create good-paying jobs for disadvantaged community members. Addressing environmental injustice in every pocket of the country will take a wide array of strategies. So in addition to removing legacy pollution, one of the strategies our administration is doubling down on is ensuring that all people can access and take advantage of the benefits of nature. We know that limited access to green and blue spaces, bike paths and trails, safe routes to school, and other outdoor areas can have a big impact on our health and well-being, including lower rates of physical activity and higher rates of stress, mental fatigue, and illness. Earlier this month, the Biden administration announced the availability of $1 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act that will be dispersed through the U.S. Forest Service's Urban and Community Forest Program, which will help communities increase tree cover, bolster resilience to extreme heat, and increase equitable access to green spaces in communities where people live and work and play. This is an exciting opportunity that is available to community-based organizations, tribes, municipal and state governments, nonprofit partners, universities, and other eligible entities. So please make sure you continue to track all the funding opportunities coming this year and beyond. The best way to do this is to explore cleanenergy.gov, where you'll find the information on upcoming announcements that you'll need. So my message to you is this: our administration is working every day to tap into the huge potential of these legislative accomplishments. But realizing its full potential will take an all-hands-on-deck effort from local communities, states, and partners like you. And many of you know, a large percentage of the investments in the Inflation Reduction Act come in the form of tax credits, incentives, and grant programs available to communities across the nation. Our success is largely dependent on how many and how soon people take advantage of these provisions. So this is where your help and your assistance is so crucial. Please continue to shed light on the issues that your communities, cities, towns, and neighborhoods are facing, and look out for ways the president's legislation can help. We need everyone's help to make real the promise of a safer and more equitable country for all. And so I will close where I started by just thanking you for your partnership and your efforts along the way. We are sitting at a pivotal moment on our collective climate fight, but we can only be successful in the work we're doing through partnerships with federal, state, and local governments and the private sector. I know our transition to a clean energy economy at the pace and scale that is required is required to meet this moment and create a more equitable nation is possible. And that's why it's so important to have events like the one you're having today and the great work that you do in other contexts. So thank you very much for inviting me today. And I think there's a couple of questions coming.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Mallory, and thank you for that call to partnership. Good evening, good afternoon, all. My name is Kim Leary, and I'm a Senior Vice President at the Urban Institute and also an Associate Professor at Harvard Medical School, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Chair Mallory, we so appreciate your insights. As we reflect on how far we've come from the first Earth Day, we now have a federal government making historic investments, as you described, in clean air, in clean water, and providing safe and healthy environments for communities that have too often borne the burden of pollution and dirty infrastructure. It is, as you say, just an important pivotal moment. We're so glad that you have some time to answer a few questions from some of the mayors and other officials on today's call. And I'd like to first invite Mayor Norton from Rochester, Minnesota, to ask the first question. Mayor Norton?
Thank you so much. And Chair Mallory, thank you for those wonderful words. The city of Rochester, Minnesota has been focused on our parks, on planting trees, and trying to put in an urban forestry policy in our city, partly to address climate change. You spoke about the recent executive order and the funding announcement that will expand access to trees and green spaces in disadvantaged urban communities. Could you talk to me a bit more, and to all of us a bit more, about your efforts to expand equitable access to parks and nature? You mentioned urban areas. Could you define urban, what that would look like, who would qualify, and whether it's only for new parks, or could we utilize those funds on parks that are already there that need improvement?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I think we recognize the importance of ensuring that the benefits of nature, and those are both health and mental benefits, which I think we all kind of observed during our years when the pandemic had us all locked at home, that it really mattered if people had access. And we know from data that 22 million people in the United States really lack access to nature in their communities. And so we've been focused on trying to ensure that the funding that is available includes prioritizing communities that are often left behind, communities where the nature is lacking. And I would say that in terms of the definitions of it, it's going to really depend on what program you're looking at, because as you know, this dollar is flowing specifically through programs. And so for definitions, I think you should look at the actual program that you end up applying to. But the way that we have been envisioning these programs broadly is they're both urban and in rural areas. They would both include the new areas, but also upgrading, restoring areas or improving areas. As a general matter, that's how the programs have worked. And I think that's the vision for the dollars, the Inflation Reduction Act dollars that are flowing into those existing programs. We had one example that I wanted to share, which is a town in Colorado called Alamosa, which received nearly $5 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law to build a bridge that will connect the most urban parts of the city with the trails along the Rio Grande River. So here's an area where there is an existing area already, and we're just trying to do what's necessary to make it available for other communities members. And we at the White House, at CEQ in particular, have signed an agreement with 10 federal agencies to invest $12 billion to create more parks and safe outdoor opportunities that in nature deprived areas. So I think the notion is to really have each of the agencies who play a role in advancing nature to actually use those tools in ways to broaden the impact that we're having. So thank you for the question. I look forward to partnering with mayors on this in particular.
Thank you. Chair Mallory, we have one final question for you today. Mayor Waller from Piscataway, New Jersey. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mallory. The question I have is that many cities are developing renewable energy projects as a key component for climate action plans. However, from your perspective, can you, we're having problems, I guess, it being handled on the grid. So the question is that, is the White House working in conjunction with the State Board of Public Utilities in order to handle the future renewables that may go back to the grids? Because I know in New Jersey, they're working with the major utility providers, because that right now is potentially stymieing some of the projects that may end up sending electricity, renewable electricity back into the grid. And I'm sure that's a problem nationally too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You're so right about that. I think this is an issue that we're very, very focused on. I think there's a recognition that to transition to the clean energy economy, we have to modernize the grid in order to be able to actually manage to carry the amount of a new transmission or the new electricity needs that are going to be faced. We know that the grid system as it exists, even if we were just staying where we are in terms of usage, is old and needs to be upgraded to be more resilient so that it's able to meet the essential services. So I would say that both in the White House and working with the critical agencies, there is a real focus on ensuring that we can upgrade the grid, both from the perspective of it being an aging, but also that what is broadened to take on the new renewable power sources like wind and solar and hydro and more cars and all of these things are going to require us to have the ability to take advantage of a grid that can to do the job that's necessary. Right. One of the statistics I'll share with you is that there's an estimated 70% of the nation's transmission lines are over 25 years old. So as I said earlier, like we know it's not just that we are going to have more, more needs, more uses. We also have to make sure that what is already there actually will be able to sustain and be resilient through, multiple increased extreme weather events. So upgrading the grid will not only kind of help us meet the climate goals, it will also reduce electricity costs for families and businesses and prevent the power outages in the face of these extreme weather events. So, and of course, if you've ever heard the president talk, then you know he always says it will help create good paying jobs, which is a critical element to all of the work that I think we're trying to do here. So thankfully, we have the bipartisan infrastructure law and the investments that were made there. There's $65 billion that were a part of that for upgrading the grid. And then the Inflation Reduction Act itself has nearly $3 billion in transmission funding, which includes $2 billion that will unlock additional federal lending for projects. So the combination across the federal government and these resources in particular are very much focused on what we know is a necessary and critical need.
And hopefully, Chairwoman, that the state regulatory agencies that govern that at the state level will work hand in hand with the municipalities, because we're not going to be able to accomplish their goals unless they take care of their end first.
Yes, absolutely. That as the comment was made earlier, we talk about partnerships a lot because those partnerships are so critical across all lines in order to make these things come together in a way that will be most beneficial to the American public.
Chair Mallory, thank you so much for joining us today from the White House. And mayors, thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd like now to, so glad you could be with us. I would like now to introduce our policy panel for a discussion on how the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act funding are impacting cities, how local leaders can effectively implement the administration's Justice 40 initiative for climate projects, and how to promote urban canopies. Our panel today will be facilitated by Adam Freed, who is a principal at Bloomberg Associates, along with Mayor Kathy Sheehan of Albany, New York. Hello, Mayor, it's good to see you again. Mayor Lauren McLean of Boise, Idaho, Angela Tovar, the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago, and Joel Pannell, Vice President of Urban Forest Policy at American Forest. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all for being here. And Adam, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As Kim said, my name is Adam Freed, and I lead the sustainability practice at Bloomberg Associates, a pro bono consulting firm that works with cities around the world to improve the quality of life for the residents. I also previously led New York City sustainability's efforts under Mayor Bloomberg, and have to say I'm incredibly envious of the position all of you are on with the amount of federal funding that's available. As Mike mentioned, we planted 1 million trees in New York in 7 years, and we did that with our own budget without federal assistance. So a tremendous opportunity now that's facing cities here today. I'm also thrilled to be able to moderate this amazing panel on how cities are already advancing environmental protections for all and leveraging federal resources to accelerate this work. As you'll hear in the conversation that's about to happen, Boise, Albany, and Chicago are already national leaders in this work. Now, Mayor McLean, I wanted to start with you. You've made sustainability and climate action a central focus of your administration in Boise. Your 2021 Climate Action Plan, you actually wrote that, and I'm going to quote it, "Climate action isn't just about the environment. It's about growing a stronger, cleaner, and thriving climate economy." I was wondering if you could expand on that comment and how federal investments like the Infrastructure Act and IRA are affecting your plans to advance the climate action in Boise.
Of course. Hi, Adam. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me today. It's great to be here. And I'll say belated Happy Earth Day and early Happy Arbor Day. It's a great kind of wedge in the middle, especially with the topics that we're discussing today. You know, here in Boise, I have centered climate work in all of the work that we do, because as I did write earlier, it's about creating strong economies, but ultimately this is about protecting people, protecting our health, protecting the affordability of our homes, protecting the places, open space, and parks that we love, and then yes, setting us up to win economically in the long run as the world changes. And we set several goals that, because I believe that what gets measured gets managed. And so as a city, we aim to be fueled by 100% clean electricity by 2030. We will beat that goal, which is really exciting. And in doing that, it's made possible because of partnerships that we have with our electric power company, with innovative staff at the city of Boise that's helping us make really smart decisions and invest in our own buildings to be more efficient. And of course, with the community wanting us to lead and helping us to do this. And then, of course, we have goals to be carbon neutral as a city government by 2035. And as a city, a community, to be fueled by clean electricity by 2035 and then carbon free by 2050. Now, we've been able to make investments and to advance some of this work because of funds that are available at record levels. Because we know that we're going to be powered by clean electricity, we want to take advantage of that. So we are transitioning our city buildings off natural gas and making them be wholly reliant on electricity, and then in the downtown core on our geothermal system. We're electrifying our fleet and focusing on kind of the larger trucks, the garbage trucks, the buses, things like that, made possible with funds and investments. And then we're building only electric buildings moving forward to take advantage of that clean power, and really seeking to take what we've learned and the innovation that's necessary to meet those goals as a city government to help do this citywide, but also to help grow opportunity from a jobs perspective in the long term for our residents.
And you're also doing that while being one of the fastest growing cities in the country as well, and managing that growth for future generations as well.
Yes, we are a fast growing community. And one of the things that we're doing because of that, we got to stay ahead of growth, is we're addressing our 1960s zoning code. Just this week, our Planning and Zoning Commission is reviewing the modern zoning code that's been written the last 2 years, and the City Council will be weighing it and considering it in June. And that makes it possible for us to plan for infrastructure, to make sure that we've got parks in the right places, we've got trees planted, and to get ahead of the growth as we grow while meeting all these climate goals that we have.
That's incredibly exciting. Now, Mayor Sheehan, I want to shift up north to Albany. You focused much of your climate work in the city on bringing resources to historically underserved communities. You used $500,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funding to replace lead service lines. You invested more than $50 million in green stormwater infrastructure. Can you speak to how your environmental projects are working to promote equity and advance the Justice 40 goals within your city?
Absolutely. And, it's really important that people are able to connect with this work in a real way. And so whether it was our streetlight buyback, where we bought back our streetlights and converted everything to LEDs, not only is that taking 2,000 tons of CO2 out of the air every year, but we started in our environmental justice communities where we tend to see higher crime rates, where people are more concerned about the light and the brightness of the light on the streets and the sidewalk, because they're less likely to have cars, they're more likely to ride public transportation. So we've really been thoughtful as we've rolled out these climate initiatives to ensure that that impact is felt in those our environmental justice neighborhoods. We launched a program stolen directly from you, a little smaller because we're a bit smaller than New York City, but 2,025 trees by 2025. I'm pleased to say we're going to be done with that by the end of this year. But again, we are focused on those neighborhoods that are, places where we have these urban heat islands where we need more trees. And not only does that deal with an environmental justice issue, but it allows us to talk to our residents about stewardship, about what they can do to help in their community block by block, that we're making investments alongside them and with them, and we want them to be part of that decision making so that they can actually see directly the benefits of this work. One of the things I'm really excited about is that we're partnering with a really trusted community-based organization that helps low-income folks achieve home ownership. And they are doing a pilot right now of creating a geothermal loop in one of our EJ neighborhoods that all of the buildings and houses and apartments in that neighborhood would be able to connect into for heating and cooling. Again, not just doing this, we have an all electric apartment building that's going up market rate, some will call them luxury apartments, not just in that market. We want to be able to show and demonstrate that this can be done in communities that are really most impacted by and most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change.
I think you're really showing the power of cities where you joke that you stole the idea from us in New York on tree planting, but I think many cities are going to be stealing some of those ideas and really seeing that positive leapfrogging ahead of people towards the finish line on this. Angela, I want to shift to Chicago because equity has really been at the heart of Chicago's climate work under Mayor Lightfoot. We recently worked together with C40 to analyze with you where the IRA and IIJA could help the city achieve your climate goals and ensure that communities were not left behind as part of the energy transition. So I wonder if you could share with us some of what you will see in that forthcoming report and how the city can go about fully leveraging those opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. And so I'll just start with some context first. So in 2022, the city of Chicago put forth our first climate action plan since 2008. And it was a unique moment in time in our history, right? This is a time where we're in the midst of a global pandemic. You know, this is a time where communities are facing an economic downturn. And this is a time where, you know, historic racial injustices are finally being exposed, and we're grappling with that as a country. And so in this moment in time, and luckily, you know, we've had climate leadership at the city of Chicago for a very long time. You know, again, that 2008 climate action plan really set the stage for many cities across the country to also, you know, create robust climate action plans and really lead on climate change mitigation and resiliency and adaptation. And so we're grateful to have that history. And so through the previous administration, through the Rahm Emanuel administration, the city had already set targets to align with the Paris Climate Agreement. So in this moment in time, we really wanted to create a climate action plan that spoke to both our priorities as a city to drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but to also think about those equitable co-benefits that we could deliver to community residents, to think about how we could think about decarbonization and cost savings, how we can think about our public transportation system while also thinking about access to critical infrastructure as a city, and to think about how we could change our policies to support better air quality and reduced emissions throughout the city as well. And so in our report, we have a list of actions that get the city, in our climate action plan, we have a list of actions that talk about just, again, this is framed around a specific moment in time, but it's a 62% reduction by 2040 and really driving those meaningful benefits that our communities deserve right now. Of course, we know that we can be thinking about a more ambitious target for the city to stay aligned with our previous goal that we already set. And of course, the 2022 Climate Action Plan was designed before IRA was announced, right? And so we have the opportunity now to go back in coordination with Bloomberg, with our partners at C40, and then with our consultant Slipstream, to really reevaluate those goals and to say, you know, how can we maximize opportunities through IRA, and also looking back at the bipartisan infrastructure law as well. And so, you know, we came together to really analyze each action, to look at where there are opportunities to really accelerate that goal through this influx of capital. And I think that there were a couple of buckets. And then again, you know, the important thing here is that there's this equity layer, right? This has to be at scale. We can't design actions that allow some people to transition without leaving people behind. I think that through this process, and what you'll see in this report, is that there are a lot of opportunities for us to move forward. There's a lot of organizing involved, and much like Mayor Sheehan just described, coordination with community groups. But we found primarily that there are two opportunities to accelerate Chicago's goals, both in the decarbonization space and looking at the transition of all of our buildings across different building typologies and throughout the city. And then, of course, advancing vehicle electrification and finding opportunities to create access to electric vehicles and also other low carbon mobility sources while advancing an electrification network for the city of Chicago. So I'm very excited for that report to come out and to continue to build that momentum to achieve our climate goals.
No, I'm very excited for that as well. And I think, you know, we'll make sure we share it with this group as well, because it provides a roadmap for how cities can also look at comparing the bill to what they're trying to do in the city, and then where are things going to come to them reactively, and where do you proactively have to make sure that residents and others are applying for tax credits and such, but such a tremendous opportunity. Joel, I want to turn to you because we've talked about a big opportunity today a couple of times with the urban and community forestry grants. $1 billion is now available for cities and others to plant trees. I was wondering if you could give us some additional insights into how this funding can be used and how cities should prepare themselves to meet a June 1st application deadline that's quickly approaching. And many of you will see in the chat, we've already put in links to resources that American Forest and Joel and his team have put together to help guide you through that process. But Joel, I wonder if you could offer your insights on that.
Absolutely, Adam. So thank you to everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm always excited to talk about all the opportunity related to this federal funding and what cities are doing around expanding equitable access to urban tree canopy. And just as a quick note too, when I first started working on this 2 years ago, and we started throwing around the $1 billion figure in terms of what we would be trying to get for the urban and community forestry program and any sort of climate reconciliation package. And this is a program that's typically funded at about $30 to $40 million a year. And many folks were saying, there's no way the Forest Service can spend that money or get it out. And the number one answer to that repeatedly was ask the cities. Cities are already doing this work at scale. They don't have the luxury to sit and wait on the impacts of climate change and the effects that this is having on their most vulnerable residents. And so just really excited that we were able to partner with a lot of people and that this funding was get across the finish line and it's now available. And so, and I know there was a specific question on what is urban. And so for the purpose of the Urban and Community Forestry Program, it had been communities of 2,500 and up. The 2020 census sort of changed the definition of urban a little bit and said maybe a 5,000 population threshold, but it is a very expansive program. It covers about 84% of the country. And I think in terms of preparing for these June 1 proposals, we know that things that are going to, again, expand that equitable access to tree canopy, really prioritizing disadvantaged neighborhoods, broadening community engagement so that those who are most impacted by lack of access to tree canopy are at the front of the line for access to these funds. I think what Mayor Shaheen mentioned about working with community-based organizations who are not just environmental or tree groups, but those who are focused on housing, criminal justice reform, all those community-based groups who are trusted and embedded in the community and really can align their priorities and see that alignment with increased access to tree canopy. And so I think, again, having those sort of partners, really having a comprehensive plan for sustainable long-term urban forestry. The Forest Service is really interested in funding bodies of work and programs of work and not just one-off projects so that they can really create lasting impact, as Chair Mallory said, and really have the greatest success and impact with this federal funding. And so I know we'll get into specific questions about proposals and things like that, but I wanted to put those things out there from the beginning.
And one thing I want to flag, because I know a lot of federal funding often comes with the local match or requirements. There's probably an important lead that's buried here around that maybe do you want to talk to very quickly?
Absolutely. So in addition to the unprecedented amount of funding for this program, there's also a discretion at the waiver at the discretion of the USDA secretary that I know they want to use pretty liberally. And any proposals that can show that 100% of the benefits will be going to disadvantaged communities. Disadvantaged will be defined by things like the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, other federal tools, as well as American Forest has a tree equity score tool that can really pinpoint where these gaps in tree canopy coverage are. And so that match waiver is available, again, for any proposals that deliver 100% of the benefits to disadvantaged communities.
It's really an incredible opportunity, and I'll unabashedly plug the Tree Equity Tool by American Forest. That really is a terrific resource to help pinpoint that. Mayor McLean, want to circle back to Boise because you've already committed ahead of this amount of funding to plant a new tree for every household across the city, 100,000 trees by 2030. And at the same time, you've developed a Clean City Index to understand where there are disparities in access to environmental and health amenities in the city. I'm wondering, how are those efforts intersecting, and are you taking a similar approach to what Joel was just outlining?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I get a smile on my face because we do have we are the city of trees. Boise, its name was Boise, wooded. And so we're the city of trees and have a City of Trees challenge that we just recently renamed the Elaine Clegg City of Trees Challenge. in honor of a 20-year plus serving council member here. We have a goal of planting a tree. It's really doubling our tree canopy. So planting a tree for every household. And then in the national forests around us, planting a seedling for every resident. So that's 235,000 seedlings in the forests around Boise. And then, as you said, doubling the tree canopy here by planting a tree for every house. We're on track to get that done. And we're using, as you mentioned, to make investments, whether it be where the city goes to plant trees, because residents can plant their trees and get counted. We have a place where they can go and type it in and get credit. But where the city's making investments on trees, where we're seeking to make investments on parks and other things, uses our Clean Cities Index, which takes into account kind of environmental and demographic needs within our city. And we've also done heat mapping. So we understand where it's hotter in Boise than in other places to also help guide investments in that tree canopy because it has such a cooling impact. Did this before these programs were announced. Look forward to the opportunity to not have to rely only on our general funds to meet these goals, but really to advance better shade, cooler neighborhoods, better just like environments within our neighborhoods throughout the city with the help of measuring these indicators and then ultimately outcomes through the Clean Cities Index and the programs that we have to double our tree canopy.
I really love that data-driven approach and being proactive, kind of leading the way for what the federal government now is trying to encourage others to follow behind on. And Mayor Sheehan, cities have really been able to access this unprecedented federal funding for climate projects, not just now, but in the past few years. What are some of the game changers that this funding is enabling in Albany?
Well, I mean, we've been able to access funding to deal not only with reducing our carbon footprint and electrifying and doing all the things that we need to do to switch to renewables. We now purchase a majority of our energy from renewables, but we've got to get all the way there. It is also helping, and this is very important, right? We're talking about creating new economies and new jobs. And we're really fortunate in the city of Albany to have a port. A lot of people don't think of Albany as a port city, but we have a port on the Hudson, and we are an integral part of the supply chain for all of the offshore wind projects that are happening along the eastern seaboard. And so what that means is jobs. Low barrier to entry, good paying jobs for our residents. And so connecting them to that story of why renewables, why are we hearing about this? Why are we talking about this? Why is it important? I think that bringing it up, to like that 100,000 foot level of saying, this is what this switch to renewables is going to require. And it means a future, not only for you, but for your children and your children's children. And so as we do that, we also have to look at the environmental impacts of that. Our port is a port that has lots of truck traffic through it. It's also in an EJ neighborhood. So we want to use things like vegetation and screening to ensure that we're cutting down on noise, that we are electrifying the fleets that are going near this neighborhood, that we are providing alternative truck access so that you're not having particulates kicked up in the air around these EJ neighborhoods, so that we are really connecting. Not only are we creating these job opportunities, a new industry, new future for our country, but we are doing it in a way that doesn't repeat the failures of the past. And it doesn't repeat the mistakes that were made in many of these neighborhoods where we put people too close to these types of activities. And so, that's really, for me, one of the really exciting things is that we're kind of in both places. We're switching to renewables. We're talking about the importance of this. We're making it as real as we can for our residents. And they're going to see part of this industry built right here in their community.
That's such a powerful example of that transformative impact that can be happening. I want to encourage folks, we're going to be opening it up for questions shortly. So please, if you have questions, comments, ways that you're using funding in different ways or ideas that you have, please start putting those into the chat. We want to make sure we can include you in the conversation. But want to go next back to Angela and switch back to trees for a moment, because under Mayor Lightfoot, Chicago has launched Our Route Chicago to increase tree planting in the city with a very heavy focus on historically underserved communities. It has a lot of alignment with what we heard Mayor McLean talking about in Boise, and a strong alignment with the urban community forestry grants. I was wondering if you can give us some perspective on that program, particularly of how you're engaging with communities to ensure that the change happens with them and not to them.
Yes, and thank you for coming back to me on this topic. I love to talk about trees as well, and eager to reach out to the mayor to talk more about what's happening in Boise, because I think that there is a lot of alignment here. And much like Boise, right, Chicago is also advancing a data-driven approach. And this work, of course, started, the Mayor Lightfoot in 2022 made a $188 commitment, $188 million commitment, rather, not just $188, $188 million commitment to climate and environmental justice priorities. And a big portion of that, $26 million, was to investing in the tree canopy. Prior to that investment, we did a lot of work to understand the state of trees. And trees in the city of Chicago are planted by request. So you call 311, you request a tree. And what we found was that communities, individuals in more affluent communities were using the 311 tool more frequently. So there was really a disparity in terms of where our trees were planted throughout the city. And we knew from an equity perspective that in order to ensure that people were receiving the benefits that trees bring, that we had to rethink our strategy. And so we went to our health department to work with us on a tree equity tool that, much like Boise, looks at things like social vulnerability, flood susceptibility, different socioeconomic data. It looked at canopy coverage and aggregated all of that data to allow for us to identify priority communities. And very similarly, right, from what you're hearing from everyone on this panel, we know that there are already people in our communities that are leading this work, and it's up to us to really uplift and to understand their vision for community. And so we invited the tree community and other stakeholders, people that were passionate about trees, to come to a table with the city. We created something called the Tree Equity Roundtable, where we meet at a regular cadence to discuss issues related to trees. In addition to that, so separate from the Tree Equity Roundtable, we also created something called the Tree Ambassador Program. And the Tree Ambassador Program applies an organizing approach to increase the volume of trees in communities, in these priority communities that we've identified. So we have dedicated individuals that work in coordination with our forestry division as well as our transportation division, who both of who plant trees on behalf of the city. And they are going door to door and talking to various organizations and individuals and communities about the value of trees. They're working and leading on tree planting. And then in addition to that, they're supporting the city in creating increased demand in our priority areas related to trees. So we're very excited to continue the momentum of the Tree Ambassador Program. I know as we see the funding coming through, we're very eager to sustain that level of partnership and to expand it beyond our first initial 13 priority communities. We are working with Adam's team at Bloomberg. We have now committed to an equity priority. We are going to ensure that 40% of the trees that we plant by the city of Chicago are in those priority communities. And we've expanded the number of priority communities from 13 to 22.
It's incredibly exciting work, and to go out and see the community ambassadors at work and the pride and excitement they feel, and to see the impact it's having on the way trees are being received and sought after in communities is really powerful. Joel, want to make sure we circle back to you. We have a question in the chat that I'm going to fold in as well. One of the reasons why so many cities are planting trees is because of climate change, and a lot of the focus today, that not only means our cities are going to be hotter, so we need more shade, but that we need to think differently about how we're planting trees and potentially what trees we're planting. What are you seeing and how cities can prepare for that and thinking about planting trees for 30 years in a shifting environment? And for those cities that may be panicked knowing that a June 1st deadline is looming for a new grant project they might not be aware of, I was wondering if you could talk about some of the multiple ways cities can go about accessing this funding.
Yes, Adam. And so maybe I take the second question first, and that is obviously June 1 deadline is very, very quickly approaching. If you read the notice of funding opportunity, they are offering to work with pass-through entities. And so national organizations like American Forest, I see our friends, Arbor Day Foundation are on the call as well. And so we are going to be applying to work as a pass-through entity in partnership with the Forest Service to meet the needs of communities who may need a little bit more time or may need a little bit more hands-on technical assistance. I should also mention that there's last week when the NOFA was announced, $250 million was allocated to states. And so I think one of the big ideas there is that communities who are seeking less than the minimum threshold for the federal award, which is $100,000, will have the opportunity to apply to states. So 80% of that 250 million is required to be subawarded by states. And so in the handout that we are passing out, you will see information on both of those options, either applying through your state, applying through a pass-through entity at a later date, or applying directly to the Forest Service by June 1. And then in terms of your first question, yes, I think obviously climate mitigation and adaptation is a huge priority of this funding. We know with increases in climate change, we're also seeing increases in pests and other threats to urban forests, increases in invasive species. One of the things that American Forest has done is we've worked with the Forest Service to develop a climate adaptation and optimizing human health guide, so that you're looking at things like which species of trees should we be planting that are optimal for not the conditions today or conditions of many decades ago that we were often planting, but making sure that we're planting the most resilient species, and again, optimized for human health going forward, depending on, based on what scientists say our climate will look like over the next 30, 40, 50 years. And so those are things that are being put in place to look at that. And also maintenance always comes up with a question, but protection of existing canopy is often where you're going to get your greatest benefit. So that's certainly eligible activity, maintenance, and a lot of the workforce development and creation, job training, particularly for young people and those who face other barriers to employment, people who have been justice involved. That is a great opportunity to create jobs and transferable skills in the very communities that have been historically excluded from economic opportunity. And so I think all those things go hand in hand.
I have to say, having worked in cities for 20 years, this program sounds a little too good to be true in terms of everything that's eligible and the thoughtfulness behind it. Joe, I want to sneak in one last question to you that we had from the city of Hot Springs. Are pass-through grantees eligible for that 0% match if all the project occurs within a disadvantaged neighborhood?
Yes, so the match waiver can apply to pass-through entities, and there's the obvious requirement that match must be passed on to any subawards. But yes, so that is definitely applicable to pass-through entities as well as to entities applying directly to the Forest Service.
Excellent. Well, Joe, I want to thank you and Angela and Mayor McLean and Mayor Sheehan for joining us today and sharing your insights and the incredible work that's happening in all of your cities. And Kim, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much. And thanks for a terrific facilitation, Adam. And let me add my thanks to Mayor Sheehan, to Mayor McLean, and Angela for sharing your experience and for implementing transformative climate and green space initiatives in your cities. And Joel, thank you for sharing your insights on the exciting funding opportunities ahead to accelerate tree planting in our cities. As Mike said, who doesn't love trees? Well, as a result of this conversation, I think we can say, who doesn't love tree ambassadors, tree equity roundtables, and the incredible opportunities ahead for cities to ensure that tree equity is part of their equity planning. So we thank you all for joining us today. And as we do each of the webinar, in each of the webinars we have, we want to close, or before we close, by hearing from you. So please do take a moment to respond to a quick Zoom poll that you'll see on your screen. It'll just take a moment or two for you to submit your reply, but it's really helpful to us as we plan for our programs ahead. Let me also say that the local infrastructure hub has resources and experts that are available to answer your questions. And in the chat, our colleague Jamie has mentioned that if you go to the website, please consider bookmarking it so that you can get to it very quickly. In the chat, you'll also see that there's a link to a guide on green space enhancement and restoration opportunities under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, along with a document that describes some winning strategies to implement Justice 40. We also want to call your attention to the resources from our technical assistance boot camps that we are also sharing on our website. If your city is applying for funds through the Changing and Fueling Infrastructure Program, Safe Streets and Roads for All, or Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, we encourage you to check out the tools our experts have curated to help you to develop ambitious and competitive programs. Let me also invite you to look ahead to Tuesday, May 9th, which is when we'll have our next Infrastructure Hub session, Tuesday, May 9th. And there we will explore solutions and showcase winners of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And as always, you can find more about all of our upcoming sessions, our resources, and more on our website, localinfrastructure.org. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you along with our partners next time.